It's 11:47 p.m. You ate dinner 3 hours ago. You're not hungry, not really, but suddenly you need that chocolate bar, or those chips, or that leftover pizza. Your brain won't let it go. It's not a suggestion. It's a demand. And before you know it, you're standing in front of the refrigerator, wondering how you got there. Here's the truth that might surprise you. That craving isn't a failure of willpower. It's not a character flaw. It's biology. Pure, fascinating, manipulative biology. And today, we're going inside your brain to understand exactly why specific foods seem to hijack your thoughts, and what you can actually do about it. Welcome to the science of cravings. Let's start with a fundamental question. What is a craving? Really? Most people think it's just wanting food really badly. But neurologically speaking, a craving is something far more specific and powerful. A craving is an intense, often intrusive desire for a particular substance, usually food, that goes beyond simple hunger. While hunger is a physiological need for energy, a craving is a targeted, specific want. You don't crave food. You crave chocolate, or salty fries, or ice cream. There's a reason for that specificity, and it starts deep in your brain's architecture. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, and several key structures work together to create what we experience as a craving. The primary players are the hippocampus, the insula, the caudate nucleus, and most importantly, the nucleus accumbens, often called the brain's pleasure center. The nucleus accumbens sits in the ventral striatum, part of your basal ganglia. This small region is ground zero for reward processing. When you experience something pleasurable, winning money, falling in love, or yes, eating something delicious, this area lights up with dopamine, the neurotransmitter most people associate with pleasure. But dopamine isn't actually about pleasure itself. It's about wanting. It's about motivation. It's about the pursuit of reward. Here's where it gets interesting. Brain imaging studies using functional MRI have shown that when people experience food cravings, the nucleus accumbens shows increased activity similar to what we see in drug addiction. In a landmark 2004 study published in Neuroimage, researchers found that simply showing people pictures of foods they craved activated this reward circuitry, even when they weren't hungry. The brain responded to the anticipated pleasure, not just the actual consumption. The insula, another crucial structure, adds the emotional and bodily sensation component to cravings. It integrates physical signals from your body with emotional states, creating that visceral, gut-level feeling of, I need this now. When researchers temporarily disrupt insula activity in animal studies, cravings diminish significantly, suggesting this region is essential for translating brain signals into felt experiences. The hippocampus contributes through memory associations. That craving for your grandmother's cookies? The hippocampus remembers the context, the emotions, the comfort. It links specific foods to specific experiences, creating powerful memory-based triggers for desire. Finally, the caudate nucleus helps with habit formation and procedural learning. When you repeatedly satisfy cravings with the same foods, this area encodes the behavior pattern, making future cravings more automatic and harder to resist through conscious effort alone. Together, these structures form what neuroscientists call the brain reward circuit. And understanding how this circuit operates is the first step to understanding why your brain seems to have a mind of its own when it comes to certain foods. Now let's talk about dopamine, because most people fundamentally misunderstand this molecule, and that misunderstanding keeps them trapped in craving cycles. For decades, popular science described dopamine as the pleasure chemical. Happy? That's dopamine. Feel good. But here's the crucial part. Once you actually consume the food, dopamine often drops. The prediction has been fulfilled. The reward has been obtained. The wanting system temporarily quiets. This explains that familiar experience where the first few bites are transcendent, but by the end, you're wondering why you wanted it so badly in the first place. Research from the University of Michigan in 2018 demonstrated this dissociation between wanting and liking. Participants were given a drug that increased dopamine levels. Their desire for food increased dramatically, but when they actually ate, they didn't report increased pleasure. They wanted more but didn't enjoy it more. The wanting system and the liking system are neurologically distinct. The liking system, interestingly, relies more on opioid neurotransmitters and endocannabinoids, the brain's natural versions of morphine and marijuana chemicals. These create the actual sensory pleasure of eating, but they're separate from the dopamine-driven motivation system that creates cravings. This separation has profound implications. It means you can crave something without actually enjoying it that much when you get it. It means the pursuit often feels better than the capture. And it means that repeatedly giving in to cravings can actually reshape your brain's reward system in ways that make future cravings stronger, without necessarily increasing future enjoyment. Studies on food addiction have shown that obese individuals often show blunted dopamine responses to food cues, similar to what we see in drug addiction. The reward system becomes less sensitive, requiring more intense stimulation to trigger the same response. This creates a vicious cycle. You need more food, more sugar, more fat to get the same dopamine hit, while your brain's wanting system becomes hypersensitive to food cues in the environment. The food industry understands this neuroscience intimately. Food scientists specifically engineer products to maximize dopamine release through what they call the Bliss Point, the optimal combination of sugar, fat, and salt that creates maximum wanting without triggering satiety. These aren't accidents. They're calculated applications of the dopamine system designed to create repeat customers through biological manipulation. If we're talking about cravings, we have to talk about sugar. Because of all the substances that hijack your brain's reward system, refined sugar might be the most effective and the most dangerous. Let's start with some evolutionary context. For most of human history, sugar was rare. Fruits contained it, but seasonally and in limited quantities. Honey existed but was difficult and dangerous to obtain. Our ancestors might have encountered concentrated sweetness a few times per year, if that. This scarcity shaped our biology. Sweet taste became a reliable signal for quick energy, carbohydrates that could be rapidly converted to glucose, fueling immediate physical activity. Natural selection favored those with strong preferences for sweet tastes, because in an environment of scarcity, this preference led to better survival and reproduction. The problem? Evolution never anticipated refined sugar. It never anticipated that humans would learn to extract pure sucrose from sugarcane and beets, creating a substance that delivers the signal without the substance. Pure energy without fiber, nutrients, or satiety factors. When you consume sugar, multiple brain systems activate simultaneously. The taste receptors on your tongue send signals to the brainstem, then to the thalamus, and finally to the cortex, creating immediate sensory pleasure through those opioid and endocannabinoid systems we discussed. Simultaneously, sugar triggers dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens, often more powerfully than cocaine in animal studies. A 2007 study from the University of Bordeaux made headlines when researchers found that rats given the choice between sugar water and intravenous cocaine overwhelmingly chose the sugar. Even rats already addicted to cocaine switched their preference to sugar when given the option. The researchers concluded that the intense sweetness surpasses cocaine reward. This isn't just about taste preference. Sugar creates what neuroscientists call cross-sensitization. Exposure to sugar makes animals more responsive to other addictive substances. Sugar-primed rats show enhanced responses to cocaine, amphetamines, and alcohol. The biological mechanisms of sugar reward and drug reward substantially overlap. But sugar's manipulation of your brain goes deeper than dopamine. It also affects your endogenous opioid system, the same system targeted by heroin and oxycodone. When rats are given the opioid blocker naloxone, which reverses heroin overdoses in humans, they show classic withdrawal symptoms if they've been consuming sugar. Teeth chattering, anxiety, tremors, aggression. Sugar creates physical dependence with genuine withdrawal. Human studies confirm these patterns. In 2015, researchers at the University of Edinburgh used PET scans to examine how sugar affected human brains. They found that sugar consumption reduced the availability of dopamine D2 receptors, exactly the same receptor reduction seen in drug addiction. Fewer available receptors means the reward system becomes less sensitive, requiring more stimulation for the same effect. Sugar also uniquely affects your brain's stress response systems. Regular sugar consumption alters the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, your body's central stress management system. This creates a situation where sugar withdrawal itself becomes stressful, and sugar consumption relieves that stress. You're not just craving pleasure. You're craving relief from the discomfort created by the substance itself. Perhaps most insidiously, sugar affects your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, decision-making, and impulse control. Chronic sugar consumption impairs prefrontal function, literally reducing your brain's capacity to resist future cravings. A 2011 study at Yale University found that high sugar diets reduced prefrontal cortex activity during cognitive tasks, and this reduction correlated with increased impulsive food choices. The food industry leverages all of this. Sugar is added to 74% of packaged foods in the average supermarket, not because these foods need sweetness, but because sugar creates cravings, repeat purchases, and brand loyalty. It's not seasoning. It's addiction engineering. Sugar alone is powerful. But modern food science has discovered something that makes individual ingredients seem almost quaint in comparison. The combination of sugar, fat, and salt creates cravings that no single ingredient can match. This is the Bliss Point I mentioned earlier, a term coined by food scientist Howard Moskowitz, who helped develop some of the most successful processed foods in history. The Bliss Point isn't maximum sweetness, maximum fattiness, or maximum saltiness. It's the precise combination where all three intersect to create maximum wanting. Let's break down what each component does to your brain, and then examine what happens when they combine. Dietary fat, unlike sugar, doesn't trigger immediate dopamine release through taste receptors. Fat is detected through texture and mouthfeel, creaminess, richness, coating sensations. But once consumed, fat affects the brain powerfully through the endocannabinoid system. Your brain produces natural cannabinoids like anandamide, named after the Sanskrit word for bliss. Dietary fat increases anandamide production, creating genuine pleasure and relaxation. Fat also triggers the release of ghrelin, a neuropeptide that increases appetite specifically for fat. The more fat you eat, the more ghrelin your brain produces, and the more fat you want. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle distinct from sugar's dopamine mechanism. Salt operates through yet another pathway. Sodium is essential for survival. Your nerves can't function without it, your muscles can't contract. Evolution created powerful mechanisms to ensure salt consumption in an environment where it was scarce. Salt cravings are regulated by the hypothalamus, which monitors blood sodium levels and triggers seeking behavior when they drop. But just as with sugar, modern salt consumption has nothing to do with physiological need. The average American consumes 3,400 milligrams of sodium daily, far exceeding the 2,300 milligram recommended limit. And like sugar, salt activates reward pathways beyond its nutritional function. Brain imaging studies show that salt cravings activate the same limbic structures as drug cravings in addicted individuals. Now, here's where food science becomes almost sinister. When you combine sugar, fat, and salt in specific ratios, something extraordinary happens in the brain. The reward pathways don't just add together, they multiply. The combined effect is greater than the sum of individual effects. Dr. David Kessler, former FDA commissioner and author of The End of Overeating, documented how food companies systematically engineer foods to hit this triple threat sweet spot. Foods like potato chips, cookies, ice cream, and fast food menu items are designed to deliver all three simultaneously. Sugar in the coating or dough, fat in the frying or cream, salt to amplify flavor and trigger additional reward. The result is what Kessler calls hyperpalatable foods, products so perfectly engineered for brain reward that they override normal satiety mechanisms. You can eat these foods far beyond physiological need because they don't trigger the stop eating signals that natural foods do. Brain imaging research confirms this override effect. In a 2011 study at Yale University, participants were given either a high-sugar milkshake or a calorie-matched low-sugar version. The high-sugar shake caused significantly greater activation of the nucleus accumbens and insula, but did not increase feelings of fullness. The wanting system was activated. The satiety system was not. This decoupling of wanting from satiety is the hallmark of addictive substances. Heroin addicts want more even when physically ill from overdose. Gamblers want to continue even when bankrupt. And we can want more hyperpalatable food even when physically uncomfortable from fullness. The food industry knows this. Internal documents from major food companies, revealed through litigation, show explicit discussions about craveability, moorishness, and repeat appeal. These aren't consumer benefits. They're engineering specifications designed to maximize consumption regardless of consumer health. So far, we've talked about the biological mechanisms of cravings, the neurotransmitters, brain regions, and reward pathways that make certain foods irresistible. But cravings aren't purely biological. They're deeply psychological, shaped by memory, emotion, and learning in ways that make them uniquely personal and powerful. Remember the hippocampus we mentioned earlier? This seahorse-shaped structure in your temporal lobe is primarily known for memory formation, but it plays a crucial role in cravings through what neuroscientists call context-dependent memory. Every time you eat something pleasurable in a specific context, your hippocampus creates a memory linking the food to the environment, emotions, and physical state you experienced. This isn't just intellectual memory. It's embodied, sensory memory stored across multiple brain systems. That craving for mac and cheese when you're stressed? It's not random. Your hippocampus remembers every time that food provided comfort during difficult moments. The amygdala, your brain's emotional processing center, tagged those memories with positive emotional valence. Now, when stress activates your amygdala, it signals the hippocampus to retrieve those food comfort associations, creating a craving that feels like emotional necessity rather than physical hunger. This process operates largely outside conscious awareness. You don't think, I'm stressed, therefore I want comfort food. You simply find yourself wanting the food, with the emotional trigger invisible to introspection. This explains why cravings often seem to come out of nowhere. The triggering context has been processed by your brain's emotional systems before reaching your conscious mind. Classical conditioning, discovered by Pavlov with his famous dogs, plays a major role too. If you consistently eat popcorn at movies, the movie theater environment becomes a conditioned stimulus that triggers popcorn cravings. The environment alone activates dopamine release in anticipation of the associated food. This is why cravings can be place-specific, time-specific or situation-specific. Research from the University of Illinois demonstrated this effect clearly. Participants were given a specific snack in a particular context repeatedly. Later, simply placing them in that context without any food present increased reported cravings and activated reward brain regions. The environment had become a trigger through pure association. Emotional eating represents the most powerful form of memory-based craving. When we experience negative emotions, stress, sadness, loneliness, boredom, our brains seek relief through whatever means have worked historically. If food has consistently provided emotional regulation, the brain learns to trigger food cravings as an automatic response to emotional distress. Neuroimaging studies show that anticipating eating favorite foods actually reduces activity in the amygdala and other stress processing regions. The craving isn't just about pleasure. It's about predicted emotional relief. The food becomes a tool for emotional self-regulation, and the craving is the brain's way of signaling which tool it wants to use. Childhood experiences are particularly formative for craving patterns. Early exposure to specific foods creates lasting neural pathways. The foods we associate with safety, love, celebration, or comfort in childhood become lifelong craving triggers because they're embedded in our most fundamental emotional learning. This explains why dietary changes can feel so threatening beyond simple habit adjustment. Changing eating patterns means disrupting emotional regulation systems that have been in place potentially for decades. It means finding new ways to manage stress, celebrate achievements, and comfort ourselves. The resistance to change isn't weakness. It's the brain's protective attachment to known coping mechanisms. Understanding the memory and emotion components of cravings is crucial because it reveals why purely biological interventions, willpower, appetite suppressants, even bariatric surgery, often fail long-term. They address the dopamine system but not the emotional learning system. They change the body's response to food without changing the brain's association of food with emotional needs. If you've stayed this long and you're enjoying this, hit subscribe, like, and drop a comment. Now back to our deep dive. The same neuroplasticity that allowed craving pathways to form allows them to be modified. Every time you resist a craving, you weaken the associated neural pathway slightly. Every time you substitute a new behavior, you strengthen alternative pathways. The brain is never fixed. It's always adapting to your choices. Understanding the timeline of neuroplastic change helps set realistic expectations. Research suggests that consistent behavioral change begins altering reward pathway sensitivity within 2 to 4 weeks. Significant restructuring of craving responses typically requires 3 to 6 months of sustained practice. Full normalization of dopamine receptor levels, similar to what occurs in addiction recovery, may take a year or more. This doesn't mean cravings remain equally intense throughout. They typically peak in intensity during the first 2 weeks of behavior change, then decline in both frequency and strength. The extinction burst phenomenon, temporary intensification of a behavior when it's first restricted, is well documented in behavioral psychology. Expecting this surge helps prevent the discouragement that leads to relapse. The key mechanism is extinction learning, rather than unlearning. You don't erase craving pathways. You create new, stronger pathways that compete with them. When a craving trigger appears, your brain now has multiple response options: the old consumption pathway and the new alternative pathway. Through repetition, the alternative pathway becomes the default. Mindfulness practices accelerate this process by increasing awareness of craving onset before automatic behavior engages. When you notice a craving arising, physical sensations, thoughts, emotional states, you create a pause between stimulus and response. This pause is where choice lives. Neuroimaging studies show that experienced meditators have enhanced prefrontal cortex activation during craving experiences, suggesting strengthened executive control. The same neuroplasticity that allowed craving pathways to form allows them to be modified. Every time you resist a craving, you weaken the associated neural pathway slightly. Every time you substitute a new behavior, you strengthen alternative pathways. The brain is never fixed. It's always adapting to your choices. Understanding the timeline of neuroplastic change helps set realistic expectations. Research suggests that consistent behavioral change begins altering reward pathway sensitivity within 2 to 4 weeks. Significant restructuring of craving responses typically requires 3 to 6 months of sustained practice. Full normalization of dopamine receptor levels, similar to what occurs in addiction recovery, may take a year or more. This doesn't mean cravings remain equally intense throughout. They typically peak in intensity during the first 2 weeks of behavior change, then decline in both frequency and strength. The extinction burst phenomenon, temporary intensification of a behavior when it's first restricted, is well documented in behavioral psychology. Expecting this surge helps prevent the discouragement that leads to relapse. The key mechanism is extinction learning, rather than unlearning. You don't erase craving pathways. You create new, stronger pathways that compete with them. When a craving trigger appears, your brain now has multiple response options: the old consumption pathway and the new alternative pathway. Through repetition, the alternative pathway becomes the default. Mindfulness practices accelerate this process by increasing awareness of craving onset before automatic behavior engages. When you notice a craving arising, physical sensations, thoughts, emotional states, you create a pause between stimulus and response. This pause is where choice lives. Neuroimaging studies show that experienced meditators have enhanced prefrontal cortex activation during craving experiences, suggesting strengthened executive control. Cognitive reframing also modifies neural responses. When you interpret cravings as my brain trying to help me feel better, rather than I'm weak and out of control, you change the emotional context of the experience. This reframing reduces amygdala activation and prevents the shame spiral that often triggers additional eating. Individual willpower is overrated. What matters more is environment design, structuring your physical and social context to make healthy choices easy and unhealthy choices difficult. This isn't weakness. It's strategic intelligence applied to a neurobiological reality. Start with your immediate food environment. Research consistently shows that food visibility and accessibility dramatically influence consumption. Foods visible on counters are consumed at much higher rates than foods stored in cabinets. Foods requiring preparation are consumed less than ready-to-eat options. The path of least resistance determines behavior more than intentions do. Apply this knowledge proactively. Store ultra-processed foods out of sight, in inconvenient locations, or don't purchase them at all. Keep whole foods visible and accessible. Pre-prepare healthy options so they're as convenient as ultra-processed alternatives. Make the default choice the healthy choice. Grocery shopping represents a crucial intervention point. Never shop hungry. Hunger amplifies reward system activation and reduces prefrontal function. Use a list and stick to it, reducing decision fatigue and impulse purchases. Shop the perimeter of the store where whole foods are typically located, minimizing exposure to ultra-processed center aisles. The outer ring strategy works because of what behavioral economists call choice architecture. When you limit exposure to temptation, you conserve the cognitive resources needed to resist it. Willpower is a finite resource. Design choices that don't require it. Social environments require different strategies. You can't always control what others eat, but you can influence your exposure and develop coping scripts. Eat before social events where problematic foods will be present. Position yourself away from food tables. Practice polite refusal scripts until they become automatic. No thank you, I'm satisfied, or I'm not eating that today. Social pressure to eat is real and powerful. Research shows that people eat more when eating companions eat more and feel uncomfortable refusing offered food. Preparing responses in advance. I'm focusing on feeling energetic tomorrow, or my doctor suggested I watch my sugar. Provides social cover that reduces pressure. Consider also the social contagion of behavior change. When you modify your eating patterns, you influence your social network. Visible commitment to health creates permission for others to make similar changes. Finding or creating communities of support, whether formal groups or informal friend networks, provides reinforcement that makes individual change sustainable. What you eat directly affects your brain's vulnerability to cravings. Nutritional strategies can stabilize the neurobiological systems that, when dysregulated, create intense food wanting. Protein intake is foundational. Protein increases satiety hormones like peptide YY and GLP-1 while reducing ghrelin, the hunger hormone. It also provides amino acid precursors for dopamine and other neurotransmitters, supporting healthy reward function. Research consistently shows that higher protein breakfasts reduce cravings throughout the day compared to carbohydrate-heavy alternatives. Aim for 25 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast: eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or protein-rich smoothies. This single change, maintained consistently, can significantly alter daily craving patterns by stabilizing blood sugar and neurotransmitter precursors from the day's start. Fiber intake matters similarly. Fiber slows gastric emptying, extending satiety. It feeds gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which influence brain function through the gut-brain axis. High-fiber foods require more chewing, slowing consumption and allowing satiety signals time to register. Whole foods naturally contain fiber. Processed foods typically don't. Healthy fats, omega-3 fatty acids specifically, support prefrontal cortex function and reduce inflammation that can dysregulate appetite systems. Fatty fish, walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds provide these fats. Their inclusion in meals enhances satiety through different mechanisms than protein or fiber, creating multi-layered satisfaction. Blood sugar stability is crucial for craving management. Rapid blood sugar spikes from refined carbohydrates trigger compensatory drops that feel like hunger, even when energy needs are met. These drops activate stress responses and cravings for quick energy sources. Sugar. Complex carbohydrates combined with protein and fat create gradual glucose release, preventing the spike crash craving cycle. Meal timing also influences cravings. Irregular eating patterns confuse the body's hunger regulation systems. Consistent meal times help entrain circadian rhythms that govern appetite. For many people, 3 structured meals with minimal snacking works better than frequent small meals, which can maintain constant digestive activity and prevent full satiety experiences. Hydration deserves mention. Mild dehydration manifests as sensations easily mistaken for hunger. Drinking adequate water, often more than people assume, can reduce cravings that are actually thirst signals. Starting meals with water also increases satiety with 0 calories. Specific foods show particular promise for craving management. Dark chocolate, 70% plus cacao, provides satisfaction with less sugar than milk chocolate. Nuts offer crunch, fat, and protein that address multiple craving types. Berries provide sweetness with fiber and relatively low sugar. Fermented foods may support gut bacteria that influence brain function. Individual experimentation identifies what works for specific craving patterns. When cravings strike, and they will, specific behavioral techniques can prevent automatic consumption. These methods derive from addiction treatment research but apply broadly to food cravings. Urge surfing, developed for substance addiction treatment, applies directly to food cravings. The technique recognizes that cravings are temporary wave-like phenomena. They rise, peak, and subside naturally if not acted upon. Most cravings peak within 20 to 30 minutes and diminish significantly if the person rides the wave, rather than fighting it or surrendering to it. To surf an urge, first recognize it. This is a craving. It's a temporary brain state, not an emergency. Then observe its physical and mental characteristics without judgment. Where do I feel it? What thoughts accompany it? How intense is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Finally, redirect attention to breathing or another anchor while allowing the craving to exist without acting on it. Research from the University of Washington found that urge surfing reduced smoking relapse rates significantly compared to suppression strategies. Applied to food, the technique helps individuals experience cravings without automatic eating, weakening the behavior-reward connection over time. The 10-minute rule provides a simpler alternative. When a craving strikes, commit to waiting 10 minutes before acting on it. Set a timer. During that interval, engage in a different activity, walk, call someone, work on a task. Often, the craving subsides naturally. If it remains intense after 10 minutes, the choice to eat is more deliberate rather than automatic. Behavioral substitution replaces the eating response with an alternative behavior that addresses the craving's underlying need. Stress cravings might be addressed with brief walks or breathing exercises. Boredom cravings might respond to engaging activities or social connection. Emotional cravings might need processing through journaling or conversation. The substitution satisfies the real need without the problematic food. Implementation intentions, specific if-then plans, dramatically increase success rates. Rather than vague intentions, I'll eat healthier. Create specific protocols. If I crave sweets after dinner, then I will drink herbal tea and read for 20 minutes. These pre-planned responses reduce decision fatigue and make healthy choices automatic. Stimulus control involves systematically removing or modifying craving triggers. If 3 p.m. workplace stress triggers vending machine visits, modify the 3 p.m. routine, take a walk, have a scheduled snack, change work locations. If television watching triggers snacking, limit eating to specific locations or change evening routines. Each trigger modification reduces total craving exposure. Finally, let's address the psychology of long-term change. Understanding cravings and having techniques to manage them is necessary but not sufficient. Sustainable change requires emotional and philosophical shifts that support persistence through inevitable challenges. Self-compassion proves more effective than self-criticism for long-term behavior change. Research by Dr. Kristen Neff and colleagues demonstrates that individuals who respond to setbacks with self-compassion, acknowledging difficulty without harsh judgment, recover faster and maintain progress better than those who self-criticize. Self-criticism activates stress responses that ironically increase cravings. Self-compassion activates soothing systems that support regulation. When you experience a craving or slip, practice self-compassionate self-talk. This is difficult. Many people struggle with this. I'm learning and improving, and setbacks are part of that process. Treat yourself as you would treat a friend facing similar challenges. Identity level change sustains behavior longer than willpower alone. Rather than seeing yourself as someone trying to eat less sugar, consider adopting the identity of someone who values energy and well-being, or someone who enjoys whole foods. When behavior aligns with valued identity, it requires less ongoing effort because it becomes self-reinforcing. Values clarification helps maintain motivation through difficult periods. Why do you want to change your relationship with cravings? What matters to you? Health, presence, energy, longevity, modeling for children. Connecting daily choices to deeper values provides meaning that sustains effort when willpower flags. Expect and plan for lapses. Perfect adherence is neither possible nor necessary for significant health improvement. The goal is progress, not perfection. Develop specific recovery plans, for when you do give in to cravings. How will you respond? How will you prevent a single lapse from becoming a total abandonment of intentions? How will you resume healthy patterns at the next opportunity? Community connection provides crucial support. Whether formal support groups, online communities, or informed friends and family, social connection reduces the isolation that cravings thrive in. Sharing experiences normalizes struggle and provides alternative perspectives when individual thinking becomes distorted by craving intensity. Subscribe for more science-based health content. Drop a comment below. What cravings do you struggle with most? Until next time, stay curious and stay conscious.